Hello everyone, this is the Paper Princess and I am all energized and ready to start our project. This is the road trip book, making it with Craft Consortium, Metal Textures paper stack, and Ciao Collateral Rust. So we have, in the last video, we made our base album. This is going to be an 8.5 by 8.5 album, and it's got a 3 3/4 inch spine. I just put in the hinge, and I hope you were able to find tutorials online. I got this from Paper Phenomenon, and I have 4 hinges here. I cut them at angles so I could put my pocket pages in there easier. And right now we're going to get started making the pocket pages. So normally I cut 8 sheets of paper, but let's just do this one at a time. We'll cut the first 2 and put them together and make sure they fit before we go cutting the rest. So I'm going to set this aside right now. And let's get started making our first pocket page. So I am using black cardstock in my album, and we're going to cut this 8.5 by 8. And I always save these strips. We will use them as our flaps along the way. So we've got 2 pieces now, 8.5 by 8, and we're going to score these 1/2 inch with the 8.5 inch side facing the top. You can either use a score board or a score runner. I'm using a score runner. So I just want to measure and make sure because it's kind of close here. Yeah, so 8.5 inch side facing up. If you're using, I've recommended the 80-pound American Crafts cardstock, and that particular brand has a linen side on one side and flat side on the other. So when I score, I put my flat side facing up, and that way when I fold the paper, the nice textured side is facing our project. So way. Okay. I'm going to be using 1/4 inch score tape and 3/8 inch score tape in this project. More commonly the 3/8 inch. It's just a perfect size for this 1/2 inch score lines. So I'm going to put my tape below that score line. And again, if you're not using the textured side, if you have your paper's 2 flat sides, you want the bumpy side, the mountain facing up, that score line, not indented in. I always press things down when I put the tape down. Okay, so what we're going to do here, fold this, and I have a method that's worked well for me for getting these to line up nice. So I'm going to put my 2 pieces of paper on top of each other like this, and let's take off the score, the backing off of the first one. What I do is I line it up so they're right butted up against each other, these 2 papers, and they're lined up left and right. And I'm just gonna, I make sure there's no space here, there's no table showing, and I press down that corner. And I walk over to here, press this in a little bit, make sure nothing's shifted, there's no table showing, and I'm gonna press down that corner, and then I can press down the rest. Okay, so now for this side, usually it just, if you fold it over, but I'm a little careful. So what I do here is I'm going to put this, I want to line up my corners. Make sure those two corners meet. And as I go along here, there, it lines up. Okay, it's a little puffy, so I'm gonna press this down, get out any bubbles. If you're slightly off and you got a little bubble, you can press it out like this, and that just means that your papers aren't exactly, I mean, the most minuscule bit could make you get a bubble, but it's not so bad. You can press it out like that. All right, so now I'm gonna make sure this fits in my book. I don't wanna cut 8 pieces of paper and have it be the wrong size. All right, so that fits. So I know I am correct with 8.5 by 8, scoring with the 8.5 side facing up. And now we have our first pocket page. Okay. All right, so I got my 2 open sides facing left and right. And I'm gonna put a page 1 up in the corner here and fold it over as if I'm turning it in my book and put a page 2. And that way I know when I go to page 2, I'm facing the right direction. This is all gonna be covered up anyway, so I've got my, and I'm consistent. I always put my page number in the top left-hand corner. So I'm gonna set this aside and let's start with our flaps. We have a fair number of them. So I'm gonna read off the measurements and then you can write them down, pause, and then cut them, and then come back with me and we'll score them together. So flap A is gonna be our top flap, and that is 7 7/8 by 5. I have a lot of these 1/8 measurements. It's just because I need a little extra room so when you turn the pages, the paper doesn't get wrinkled, and it just comes out nice that way. But if you don't have this 1/16 inch ruler like I have, I mean, you can get this online. But if you don't have that, when you, an 1/8 measurement is 2 little lines on a ruler. So 7 7/8 is 2 lines before 8. Okay, the bottom flap is also 7 7/8, and this is by 3 7/8, so that's 2 lines before 4. We're gonna need 2 left and right flaps. So flap C, you'll need to cut 2 at 6 1/4 by 4 7/16, and this doesn't usually happen. Every once in a while I get a 1/16 measurement, and I just didn't want these papers touching each other. So 7/16 is 1 line before 4 1/2. D is going to be the pocket that fits on top of flap C. You'll need 2 of them, and it's 7 1/4 by 4 7/16. So again, that's 1 line before 4 1/2. Flap E is a pocket, actually goes on the inside, and it's 8 3/4 by 4 1/4. And F, we have, these are the inserts that go into pocket D, and they are 6 1/8 by 4. So no score lines on these are just the inserts. You can, for the inserts, if you want, I use the same cardstock, but if you want a stiffer cardstock, that's sometimes good for pullouts and things. So you can use 100 pound on these if you happen to have that black 100 pound. Okay, so let's get started scoring. And we'll start with flap A. So flap A, I'm going to score at 1/2 inch with the 5 inch side facing the top of my score runner or scoreboard. B, we'll have the 3 7/8 side facing the top. Again, I'm scoring with the flat side facing up. C is the shorter side, the set 4 7/16 facing up. didn't move on me a little. Okay, so D is a pocket, and it's going to be opening with the widest side is going to be where our insert is. So that's the side you want to start at the top. And then you just turn it to the right. And again. So you've got 2 score lines on your shorter sides and 1 across the long side, and that will leave you open at the longest side. So we're going to do that again. And flap E is a pocket, and that's going to have our widest part is going to be the opening. So I'll start with that at the top. Now let's get these all taped up. Start with flap A. The textured side faces up, or the side where there's a mountain. And we'll press this all down when we get all the tape on. And now our pocket. And I have a different way of cutting the corners for the pocket, so in just a minute I will show you that. And then our big pocket. Okay. And now we can press this all down. Okay, so let's get started with flap A. I'm gonna bring back my pocket page, and I got my one up in the corner, and this flap A is the top flap. So take off the backing and let me line this up. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it over. So this is my top, and I'm going to put this, and I'm gonna use the side that's not sticky to move it around, and I want to leave just a little bit on both sides. So like one little line, 1/16 of an inch on either side. Tuck this under. Use my thumbs as a guide to make it flush at the top. And I got a little bit showing on either side. And then you got that lined up, and then you can press it down. Now the bottom flap, flap B. What we're going to do here is line this up so this is flush at the bottom, and you know, that little bit showing on either side, so it's lined up with flap A. And I'm just going to have a little bit showing between flap A and flap B, so these pages aren't constantly rubbing against each other. And then if you just see a little bit under there, it gives it some dimension, so it's nice. So instead of the main focus when I'm laying this one down being at the bottom edge, it's going to be making sure that this is lined up straight across. There's not an uneven gap. You don't want a wider space here and a narrower space there. So let's put this on here, and you make sure it matches, the A flat matches on the left and the right. So I know from side to side I'm lined up. And then I look and I make sure there's just a little bit showing between flap A and flap B, and it's even, and then I'm gonna fold that under and then lay it down. Take your time. You can always use undo and put it back down if you don't have it lined up right. I'm gonna take my time and make sure. Okay. Okay. So now we will work on our flap C and D. But before we put C, the two C's down, I'm going to take our D pockets here and cut them and put them on top of the C flap before I put it in the book. So I'm going to take the D here, take your first D, and for this corner, here's my intersection right here. I want to cut right up to that intersection where those two score lines cross, and then just turn out a little bit and then continue on. And here's a white piece of paper. So it looks like this. It looks like an arrow pointing in. And that's going to give us some control when we lay down this pocket on flap C. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. You never want to cut in past that intersection point, or you'll see it. Your pocket corner will have like a little hole there. So you don't want that. Okay, and let's do the same thing to the other flap D. Right up to that line, and then turn out. Okay, so for the first flap D, let's just take off the bottom tape backing, not the sides yet. And you just press that down. So when we cut it that funny way, it enables me to lay these two side flaps down, and it sticks there, so it holds, so I can have more control when I'm putting this pocket on. So here's a flap C, and I'm just gonna line it up first. I wanna line it up so the top is flush, the edge of D is flush with the edge of the C flap. It's even on both sides. And then I'm laying it down just above that score line. You don't want to go past the score line. Also, the thing about leaving this tape backing on there for a little bit is if you, as you're laying it down, if it's not quite right, you don't have to lift up both sides and the bottom. It's just the bottom you'd have to lift up. Because sometimes as you're placing it, you move a little bit by accident. So there's an advantage to leaving that there until we're ready to put it down. So this looks good. Let's see and make sure. And I don't need to adjust anything, so I'm going to take off the side tape backing. And there's our first pocket flap. And now we'll do the same thing. Take our second D flap, D pocket. Put that down. Okay, and our C flap here. Okay. So let's use the side that's not sticky to line it up so we can move it around if we need to. It's flush at the top, flush on the sides. I'm right up to my score line. So I'm going to lay it down. And if I lay it down like that, whoops, I see I'm a little off over here, which is why I'm glad I didn't take off the tape on the sides. And that happens sometimes as you're sticking it down. So I'm using here, if you're not familiar with it, undo, and it just allows the tape to be less sticky for a minute, and you can lift this off. Okay, so I can adjust this. It's very fast drying. It kind of smells, but it quickly dissipates. Let's make sure. There we go. Now there's nothing sticking out over here and it is flush. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to take off my sides. Okay, so you got your two C flaps here, and instead of me laying them so that they're right smack against each other, I just thought it would look good if they were offset a little bit. So I am going to lay this one 1/2 inch from the top, and what I can do, since I know this is 1/2 inch, is lay the edge of this pocket right up against this right here. And I know that's 1/2 inch. I know it'll be straight. I'm going to use my thumbs here to make sure that this lines up with the edge of our pocket page. Looks nice. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but I'm going to use the bottom edge of this B flap. Okay. There we go. All right. And then we're going to take our inside pocket here and do the same thing that we did with those D pockets. I'm cutting at my corners. So now I've got my B flap down here, and I'm gonna line this up side to side. I have to make sure that these are inside these score lines, because those flaps have to go over top of this pocket. So I'm gonna leave a little space between the pocket and this B flap. I want to leave a little bit more space in that. There was a shadow, and I thought, okay, no problem. Okay, so I want to leave a little space between this fold so it has enough room to go over this pocket. All the while, I'm looking to the side, left and right, to make sure I'm within those fold lines. All right. Let's see how this folds over. Yes, that folds over. There's room here. There's room there. I like the placement of it, so I can take off my sides. Okay. Now, before our magnet placement, let's take our 2F cutouts. And what I'm going to do is I have these graphic 45 tags I showed you in the walkthrough. These are called graphic 45 artistic trading tags. I use these as pullouts, like a pull tab. And if you don't have these, you can't find them, they are online. I just Googled graphic 45 small tags or artistic trading tags, and they were there. But you can also use things like, I have this punch that has a pull-out tab on it. So you can use other things that you may have. But if you're using this artistic trading tag, what I do is I turn it to the back side, and I'm going to put tape across here. 4 pieces of tape. So that'll hold really well. Do the same to the other tag. Okay, so let's take our first tag and peel off the tape. Okay, so I am going to go this way. This is the underside of the tag, so I'm going to put the underside of this pull out facing up. And I'm going to line it up. If you wanted to measure, you could measure the center of this and then line it up with the center of your grommet there. But eyeballing it works pretty well too. And I'm just going to lay it down. I'm also going to corner round this. I think that would look really good. You can do that before you put the tag on or after, it doesn't matter. Before I do anything else, I just want to put it in here and make sure it fits, which it does. So I can do the same thing over here. got this one over here. And now for our magnet placement. So I'm using Basic Ray small magnets. I do also buy the bigger ones because every once in a while, if something's really thick and you got a lot of paper to go through, you want a stronger hold. So I do often have those on hand. This particular page, I can get away with the smaller ones. Now these are, I buy them in bulk, so I get pretty reasonable price. They are a little more expensive, but I just like them. They're convenient. You can also order magnets anywhere online. They may not have this sticky and labeled on the back, but that's fine. If they don't have the sticky tape on the back, you could just put a 1/4 inch score tape on there. And let's do flap A first. And I'm gonna be putting 2 flaps because there is a fair amount to go through, and I think that'll make it, it'll create like a little bubble in the middle that I can easily pull this flap up. So for this particular one, I'm gonna use the sides. But before I do, I wanna make sure it doesn't land like in the middle of this. You don't want it hanging half on and half off your pocket. So kind of just fold your paper down and look where it would land. If I put it right up in the corner where I usually do, it would land right there at that. I just don't want that. I want it to land a little bit above. So I'm gonna put it a little lower than normal. Let's see, right around here. Let me test that first before I tape it down. Yes. So right about here, it'll land above my pocket. And that's about 5/8 of an inch down. Or you can just do what I just did and eyeball it and make sure it doesn't land right there. Okay, so I like where those are, and I'm going to take you can either use a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch tape to tape these down. And you do, even though the magnets have sticky on the back, you still want to tape them down. You just don't want those coming off and flopping around your book making noise and the pages don't close. It's just worth the extra step to tape them down. And it just acts like, you'll peel this off and it'll act like extra glue for when you put your design paper there. All right, so now I'm taking my opposite one, my negative. And again, if you don't have that, just put either some glitter glue on top of there or some score tape, because that helps you, the glue and tape is facing up, and when I fold this down, it'll just land where I want. Hold on, wait a minute. You know what I'm thinking? Before I do that, I should close these. Yes, it should land on these because this would be closed first. So, fold this over, press that down, and there. So all that worry about it landing above the pocket really didn't matter. I am going to make it land on these flaps. Yeah, that's better. Okay, same thing down here. And I'm going to tape this down now. Get my negative. And then we'll fold this up, press those down, and there they are. Voila. And the last thing, you can either do this now or wait till the end, up to you. But I like to have an insert in between each page. So for this book, I used 4 inserts because there's 4 pockets. And they are 7 7/8 by 7 3/4. I rounded the edges, and then I'll put that in between there. So we are at the fun part. Well, it's all fun, but the decorating the page, and I will show you right now what you'll do to decorate this first layout. Okay, this is also in my project share walkthrough, and you can always refer back to it, but I figured when we finish each page, I'll show you so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth between each video. The first page is like the cover, and it comes with this truck on here, mountains in the background, and there's this Route 66 license plate down here. So to line it up, you take your paper, put it on top of here, and just put a pencil mark like a 1/16 of an inch in, so you have a little black frame around. So you just want to make sure that you get your truck in there. And I wound up cutting just above this 3,800 number up there. And for here, I wanted to make sure I got my full license plate. I want to cut right here. So I got below the license plate, put a little pencil mark, and cut it there, and then line the rest of it up. All right, so the other side, this is from that Craft Consortium Metal Textures. Looks like this. And it has great papers in there. So I used that on here. There's a cutout page in your 12 by 12 pack, and I believe there's 4 of these. So I used the Route 66 here, so it went with the outside part, and a motorcycle there. Cut those out. If there's not enough room, like this one, I had to put just a little bit of paper right there because it wasn't quite long enough. The other side is from that Craft Consortium Metal Textures. This is from the page that you cut for your top flap and bottom flap, and I just cut it right below the Chevrolet sign here, and there's the map. For this book, this is a magnetized little booklet I made, so it's not on my cut list, but I will tell you. And you can make anything you want for these cutouts, but this is, it was a little longer than 12. So I took a piece of, cut a piece of 12, and then another piece at around, looks like 2 1/4. Scored it and attached it to here. So there is score lines right here at, I believe it's 4.5. Yeah, 4.5 from here to here, and then 4.5 between these. There's 4.5 here, and then it folds to make a little booklet. And then I put a magnet under here and on top of here. This isn't a book, it's just leftover piece of paper. So at the end, I just matted it on black. So that's how that goes. That goes first, then this. These are from that Craft Consortium. On front and back, I used this paper. And there you go. The pullout has, this is from the Craft Consortium. Basically, I like this piece to match what's going on here. Okay, so the next video will be page 2. And hope you come back, and we'll see you soon.